Blind spot. The forgotten mile on Route 61. I've driven that stretch of road hundreds of times, but only once, just once, did I feel like I wasn't alone. They call it the Forgotten Mile, a sharp bend tucked between two mountain walls along Route 61. No signposts, no cell signal, not even a good reason for anyone to stop there. But that year, someone did, and they never came back. They said Owen Blake was just another missing case, an aging trucker who lost his way. But if that's true, then why was there a line in his logbook written in blood? Why did a Polaroid show him still alive after he vanished? And why, though the man behind it is dead, does the Red Pine station camera catch a dark figure standing between two trucks? Every year on the exact same date? What I'm about to tell you isn't a hero's story. There's no triumph, only questions and silence. My name's Mason Avery. I used to be a long-haul trucker, cross-country, for 17 years. I know what it's like to be alone at night, to hear the hiss of air brakes echoing down the highway like asphalt sighing. Anyone who's ever run Route 61 knows. Red Pine Station is one of the last stops before the fog wraps around the hills. That night, the wind was colder than usual. I pulled in next to an old white Freightliner, the last rig anyone ever saw Owen Blake drive. I don't know why, but I didn't sleep in my cab. I stayed up. I listened to the radio. I stared into my side mirror, and I swear, something moved between the trucks. Not a rat, not a stray dog, a person. I didn't know who it was. But 3 days later, the cops found a strange notebook behind my truck. The cover was rain-soaked. The pages inside were smudged, smeared with ink. But one line was still readable. If you're reading this, it's already too late. I met Owen Blake exactly 3 times before that fateful night. The first was at a gas station in Kentucky. He lent me a lighter. The second, at a fall trucking expo in Ohio, where he chuckled and told me I should be using wintergreen oil instead of coffee. And the last was at Red Pine Station, out in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place people say only those with nowhere left to go ever stop at. Owen was old school, flannel shirt, a faded ball cap, and a cigarette tucked behind his ear, always unlit. Tall, lean, back slightly hunched from decades behind the wheel. But no one ever doubted how sharp he was. Every move he made felt deliberate. That night, November 3rd, 2016, he pulled into Red Pine around 8:30 p.m. I remember because I'd just parked too. The air was knife cold, and frost was already creeping across the side mirrors. Owen walked into the little diner by the station, ordered his usual, a peanut butter sandwich, fries, and black coffee. We sat across from each other, chatting about the icy stretch up north. He said he'd just called his wife back in Tennessee, promised he'd be home for their youngest daughter's birthday the following week. Last run, he said. I'm retiring. Gonna buy a small boat. The sea's always been better than the highway. I nodded. I didn't know that would be the last time anyone spoke to him like he was just another guy. At 9:42 p.m., the security camera caught Owen walking out of the diner, holding a styrofoam box with the rest of his meal, probably planning to finish it in his cab. He headed toward his silver-white Freightliner, parked way out at the edge of the lot, what we called the blind line, because no cameras ever reached that far. He stepped between 2 parked rigs, and then he vanished. The next morning, when I woke up to hit the road, his truck was still there, but the door was locked. No answer when I knocked. His dinner was still untouched on the passenger seat, cold peanut butter sandwich, just sitting there. His hat, the same old one, was hanging off the side mirror, swaying slightly like it caught a breeze, even though the lot was dead still. And I swear, something wasn't right. It wasn't the cold in the air. It was the cold that seeped in from the space between those 2 trucks, where he'd disappeared, like a door had closed, for good. I once heard someone say, a logbook never lies. It just never tells the whole story. 3 days after Owen disappeared, I came back to Red Pine with a group of other drivers. like it was some strange ritual. Maybe we just wanted to believe he'd come back, carrying a cold dinner box and some half-funny story about a dead battery or a signal dead zone out in the woods. The local police had stepped in, not because there were signs of foul play, but because Owen's Freightliner hadn't moved an inch. I watched them open the cab door. No forced entry, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Owen's logbook was lying open on the dashboard. The last entry said 2134. Arrived at Red Pine, cold front moving in. After that, blank. No notes, no departure time, no calls recorded, just empty space. Silence. But the strange part wasn't that. One of the officers pulled up the rubber floor mat beneath the driver's seat and found a folded piece of paper stuffed between the seat frame and the floor. It was damp from the draft, yellowed at the edges, but the writing was still legible. Turn off the lights. Wait. Don't say anything. No name, no address, no explanation. I remember the look in that officer's eyes. It wasn't the look of someone searching for a missing person. It was the look of someone who just read the last page of a crime novel they wish had stayed fiction. I asked him, "Could be a personal note, right?" He just shook his head. Then why hide it under the seat? And why didn't anyone know it was there? The police filed it as a missing person case. But I knew this wasn't some walk-off, not one of those drop everything and vanish kind of things that happen when a driver's drowning in debt or done with life. Owen wasn't that kind of man. He had a plan. He had a daughter. He had a reason to go home. And when I looked again at the words, "Don't say anything," I started to wonder, what did Owen hear? What did he see? Not long after that, I started hearing little things from drivers who worked the night routes. Stories. That someone had seen a dark figure crawling between the rigs, right there at Red Pine. That others heard the scrape of metal claws dragging across the concrete floor. But when they opened their cab doors, no one was there. And then, the clearest story I ever heard came from a woman I'd never met before. But what she said changed the course of the whole investigation. I'd never met Linda Ray before. Truth is, long-haul female drivers are rare, but Linda was well known among our kind, thanks to one peculiar habit. She took a picture of her truck at every stop. Every single one. Even the most deserted places. Not for social media, not as souvenirs. It all started after a minor sideswipe in Missouri back in 2012, and since then, she'd gotten meticulous, down to every step. That night, exactly 13 days after Owen disappeared, Linda pulled into Red Pine at 10:28 p.m. It was colder than usual. The fog was thick, rising off the ground like smoke. She parked her red Peterbilt along the rear wall, right across from where Owen's truck had been last seen. It would have been a regular stop, if she hadn't decided to snap one more shot, from a low angle, near the rear axle on the passenger side. Linda said, as she bent down to frame the shot with her phone, something moved. A small motion, a faint sound, like fabric brushing across damp plastic. She thought it was a stray dog, but as she squinted into the dark space between the trucks, she saw a person. He was crawling, not walking, crawling on his elbows and knees, flat to the ground, like a special forces guy. I froze for a few seconds. He wore a black jacket, head down, and he was holding something in his hand. I've heard a lot of exaggerated stories in this business, but Linda wasn't making this one up. The photo she took that night, eventually submitted into an official FBI file, clearly showed a crouched figure holding a long black pole. When they zoomed in, you could see it, a metal loop at the end of the rod, just like the kind animal control officers use to catch aggressive dogs. Except this one didn't have a net. It had a tightening steel cable. Linda backed away instantly, jumped into her cab, locked the doors, and called 911. Police showed up 17 minutes later. Too late. The man was gone. No footprints, no tire marks, no sign of forced entry. Just Linda's photo. That was the only proof. I must have stared at that photo a dozen times. But the thing that haunted me wasn't the man under the truck. It was the light in his eyes. Not from a flashlight. Not from the lens reflection. It was the way he looked. Like he knew he was being photographed. And like he wanted it that way. The photo Linda Ray took was sent to the federal investigation team just 1 day later. They zoomed in, enhanced it, bumped the contrast. And what showed up didn't just chill me. It made one FBI agent stand straight up in the middle of the meeting room. It was the face of a man. Not entirely clear, but clear enough to make out the square jawline, high cheekbones, and most of all, the eyes staring straight into the lens. No fear, no surprise. Almost like a challenge. The FBI teamed up with the West Virginia State Police to comb through over 500 hours of surveillance footage around Red Pine Station. And then, at a blind corner of the fuel station camera, they found a black SUV pulling in at exactly 9:37 p.m., just 5 minutes after Owen stepped out of the diner that night. No front license plate. The vehicle circled the lot once, then parked at the far edge of the camera's range. A spot only seasoned truckers even knew existed. No one got out. No one got in. And about 40 minutes later, right around the time Owen vanished from camera view, the SUV pulled away. We started calling him the ghost driver. No name, no ID, no biometric records. A few other drivers had reported being followed by a black SUV with no plates from one stop to the next. But in our world, most folks chalked it up to paranoia. Just the kind that sneaks in after too many miles, too many nights alone. I used to think that too. Until Agent Jensen, the one heading the Owen case, showed me a sketch. It was based on Linda's photo and the fuel station footage. "See anything?" he asked me. I looked at it. A face I didn't recognize, and yet somehow did. But it wasn't the face that sent a chill down my back. It was the hat, a faded ball cap, logo worn away from years in the sun. Exactly like the one Owen always wore. The same one that had been swinging from his side mirror the morning after he disappeared. And then I looked closer. The man in the photo had a small scar, just below the right cheekbone. Same as the late-night shift worker at Red Pine. The one I'd seen maybe 3 years back. Quiet guy. Showed up. Vanished again. No one ever knew his name. When I told that to the police, they started digging into Red Pine's old employee records. And that's when they found the first name. No employee code, no contract. But he had appeared on several overnight shift schedules. J. Harper. And that was when Owen finally came back. Not Owen himself, but something that belonged to him, found somewhere no one ever thought to look. I once heard a cop say, "If you're trying to find a missing person, don't look for the person, look for what they touched, and never let go of." That wallet was found on the morning of November 21st, nearly 3 weeks after Owen disappeared. The person who found it wasn't a cop, wasn't an FBI agent. It was a roadside cleanup worker named Derek Mills. He was picking up wet leaves, scrap paper, and bottles along a stretch of Highway 61, exactly 11 miles north of Red Pine Station, when he saw something caught under the damp grass, almost completely buried in mud. Derek thought it was a pack of cigarettes, but when he pulled it out, he found a worn brown leather wallet, edges frayed, with the faded imprint, O. Blake. Inside was everything. Driver's license, credit cards, health insurance card, and $86 in cash. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been tampered with. But there was one thing that didn't belong. It was an old Polaroid photo, bent at the edges, stuffed deep into the back pocket. In the photo, Owen's face, eyes closed, hands tied with zip ties, head tilted slightly, like he'd been laid down. Unconscious. I remember the feeling in my chest when Agent Jensen showed it to me. It wasn't just the image. It was the lack of background. The photo had been taken in an enclosed space, dark and narrow, with a dim light overhead casting shadows on Owen's chest and cheekbones. Behind him, just a gray concrete wall, stained with water streaks, like a basement. or some storage unit where light never touched. Jensen said to me, "This guy doesn't just take people, he wants others to know he did it." And I believed him. Because no ordinary killer keeps the wallet intact, the money untouched, then plants it somewhere easy to find. Unless he wants to leave a signature. But that wasn't the scariest part. On the back of the photo, in faded red ink, hand trembling, was a scrawled line. "Exit 47 is not safe." The thing is, there is no exit 47 on Route 61. At least, not on any official map. I told that to an old driver named Rick, a guy who used to run these roads long before GPS became a thing. Rick gave a dry laugh and said, "Exit 47? Oh, it used to be real. Led to an old ice plant out by the Maple River. They shut it down back in '98. Landslide blocked the road. No one goes there now, but no one's dared tear the road up either. People say sometimes you still see headlights flicker in the woods out there, around midnight." I still remember how it felt when my truck turned off the highway and onto that old gravel road heading toward the Maple Woods. A trail overgrown with moss, no signs, no streetlights. Just the deep ruts of old tire tracks pressed into the dirt like someone had driven in and never driven back out. Me, Agent Jensen, and a small investigative team got there on the morning of November 24th. Rick, the old trucker who first told us about Exit 47 that doesn't exist, came along as our guide. And the truth is, that turn doesn't show up on GPS anymore. But it's real, quiet, and it shortened the distance between us. And whatever was waiting at the end. At the end of the road stood an abandoned ice plant, about 500 square meters, left to rot since the late 90s. The windows were boarded up. The front door was chained, but showed signs of being pried open. Inside, it was colder than I expected. The air smelled like rusted metal, damp stone, and something else. Something strange, like dried blood mixed with asphalt. We brought high-powered lights and cameras. The ground floor was just a crumbling office. Old punch clocks, rotting files stained by years of moisture. But the back freezer room, where they used to store the ice, had been transformed. That room had a smooth concrete floor, walls repainted white, and right in the middle, a metal-framed bed, bolted tight into the floor. Each corner of the bed had steel restraints, the kind used in psychiatric wards or high-security prisons. Right beneath the bed, in the center of the floor, was a drain. Around it, dark stains, some scrubbed hard, but never fully erased. I crouched near the steel work table by the wall. You could still see faint smudges of handprints. And there, they found a notebook, written in blue ink, the handwriting slanted, uneven. He tracked their routes, routines, rest times, even counted how often each driver called home, as if he was collecting people. Also on the table was an old film camera, and inside it, 4 rolls of undeveloped film. One roll had been ruined by water, but the other 3 showed things we had only dared to imagine. Close-up shots, drivers bound, eyes closed, mouths slightly open, like they were still whispering something. And in the corner of every frame, there was always something placed on their chest, a trucker's wristwatch or a cab key. I don't know what was worse, the images themselves or the thought that he wanted us to find them. He didn't kill quickly. He kept them, watched them, wrote it all down, and staged it like a living collection. And it all started with a nobody, a man behind the counter at Red Pine Station, wearing a faded cap, serving coffee to night drivers like me, and Owen. We didn't know his real name. No one remembered ever having a conversation with him. But eventually, all the clues led us to a small wooden cabin tucked deep in the woods outside of Claypool, about 38 miles from Red Pine Station. The place had been rented under the alias James H. No bank account, no ID. But inside a hidden cabinet, behind a wooden wall panel, we found an external Seagate hard drive, wrapped tight in black plastic, buried beneath a mess of electrical tape and zip ties. The drive held 196 folders, each one labeled with either a license plate number or a trucking company ID. Names like USX 1904 or FRTLN JB207. Inside each folder were photos, video clips, TXT note files, and most disturbingly, route maps showing driver schedules, rest times, average speeds, most frequent stop locations. I remember one folder was named Owen BLK. It had 3 photos of Owen's cab, taken from outside, clearly shot by someone hiding behind bushes or between other rigs. There was also a file called Notes TXT. It read, routine, gas, food, phone, sleep, parks at far end, never locks door until inside, looks right twice before stepping up. Reading that didn't feel like going through a case file. It felt like reading a hunter's journal. And then, the digital forensics team found something else. A virtual network he'd logged into regularly. A deep web forum, filled with people obsessed with real-world crimes. His handle was ArcLight47. In his posts, he didn't criticize famous killers. He analyzed them. He pointed out where they'd lost control, left evidence behind, misunderstood their subjects' patterns. And in a private message to another member, he wrote, "Don't pick the wrong targets. People who call home too often become a problem. I pick the quiet ones, the ones used to being alone." I asked Agent Jensen a question I still regret. Do you think he was practicing? Jensen didn't answer. He just showed me another line from a different note. After completing 12 samples, relocate. Never bury them in the same place. And I knew then. Owen wasn't the first. That's what made everything worse. Not the number, but the cold precision. The way it all felt like he was assembling a final collection. Every detail, every victim, every experiment. No one remembers his real name. We just called him Gale, like the kind of cold wind that cuts through a mountain pass, sudden and lingering. Gale wasn't part of the task force. He wasn't an official witness. He was just a quiet trucker, salt and pepper hair, who'd gone silent from the forums for over a year. And then one day came back, with a 73-second voice message. In it, his voice was rough, trembling, but not panicked. He said, "I stopped at Red Pine once, 2015, around November 2. I parked out along the far edge, the row no one likes because the cameras don't reach there. Around 3 a.m. I heard this faint clinking sound under the chassis. Figured it was a loose chain or maybe a branch caught in the axle, so I flicked on the lights, opened the door. Nothing. But then I bent down, looked through the floor light's glare, and I saw a hand. Not a rat, not a shadow, a human hand. Pale, long fingers, wearing tactical gloves, the kind with grip texture." Gale didn't get out. He slammed the door shut, hard, leaned on the horn 3 times in a row. Footsteps. He said he heard them running off behind the truck, but never saw anyone. The next morning he found a small smear of mud, clear as day, on the rear bumper. Nothing was stolen. But under the right side tire there was a snapped zip tie, half buried in the damp soil, like someone had been holding it and dropped it when they were caught. Gale's story wasn't the only one. After the FBI released the composite sketch of the faceless man, dozens of drivers came forward with similar experiences. Headlights reflecting in their mirrors, following their rigs for over 200 miles, but never getting closer. 3 knocks on the cab door, exactly at 3:00 a.m., 3 nights in a row, same rest stop. A strange chemical scent, just a quick whiff, right before they couldn't sleep. For 2 full days. I couldn't verify every story, but I believed Gale. Because there's one thing I've never told anyone. In 2017, I stopped at Ashwood Station, about 70 miles from Red Pine. Cold night. The wind scraped along the truck roof, and I left the radio on to keep from feeling too alone. Around 2:50 a.m., the signal got a little fuzzy. I didn't think much of it, but then 3 knocks. Clear. Precise.
Right on the passenger door, the one I had just locked. I shot up, grabbed my flashlight, swung the door open, fast. No one. Just one thing. A beat-up trucker's watch lying there on the ground. Cracked glass. The hands frozen at 3 o'clock. April 2017. Spring came late in Claypool. The pine trees were still bare. The forest floor, hard and cold like stone. But when the forensic team returned to the land behind the abandoned ice plant, the place he used to walk in and out of like it was home, this time they brought cadaver dogs, not to find the living, but to trace the scent of the ones long gone. I stood about 30 steps from the fence, looking through a small pair of binoculars. When the first dog barked, everyone froze. It wasn't a warning bark. It was that bark. Slow, sure, measured. The kind of bark anyone who's searched for bodies would recognize instantly. Here, right under me. The soil there wasn't fresh, but it wasn't old either. Just unnatural. The grass grew uneven. The ground had a slight rise, like it had been pushed up from the inside. They dug down just over a meter. And that's when the stench started rising. That thick, heavy smell of something that should never still be here. The first grave, they found a sternum, 2 thigh bones, and a torn scrap of fabric with the words, Blue Ridge Logistics. The second, a smaller skeleton. The forensic lead said the shoulder had been dislocated from being pulled while still alive. The third held a faded baseball cap, logo nearly rubbed off. I didn't need DNA tests. That was Owen. The man had kept his word from the notebook. Never bury them in the same place. But Owen was the exception, because I believe he wanted us to find him. There were 5 confirmed victims total, identified by DNA. Their names were engraved into a simple stone slab, placed beside Red Pine Station 1 year later. During a memorial where more than 60 trucks blew their horns in unison, a sound that echoed across the ridge like thunder. I stood among them, the ones who made it, each of us carrying a story we never got to finish, a dream that didn't quite reach the end, a stretch of road that almost became our last. When the service ended, I was walking back to my rig when a younger driver, maybe 25, came up to me. He asked, "You think you worked alone?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked up at the heavy gray sky and said, "I think there are shadows we never quite see clearly, but they never really go away." Howard Keegan, or J. Harper as he used to sign on his shift logs, never stood trial. No defense, no confession. He died in October 2018, inside a secured isolation room at a mental facility in Allegheny County. The official report read, "Suicide, using a sharpened utensil fashioned from a plastic spoon. No note left behind. No one came to claim the body. His ashes were buried in an unmarked plot, among hundreds of others long forgotten." I think most of us, the ones who made it out, felt some kind of relief, because the story had an ending. But the truth is, it didn't. The following October, on the exact 1-year anniversary of Owen's death, Red Pine Station installed wide-angle surveillance cameras, infrared motion sensors, and high-speed night vision recorders. And between 3:12 and 3:14 a.m., one of the rear lot cameras, covering the farthest row of trucks, captured a figure stepping out between 2 trailers. Black jacket, faded ball cap, face not visible, origin unknown, just the way he walked. Calm, steady, fearless, like he belonged there. The clip was 9 seconds long, and in the final second, as the figure reached the edge of the frame, he turned his head and looked directly into the lens. Then, he vanished. No one could identify him. No footprints. No sound was recorded, even though the mic was working fine. There was only one thing left behind. On the ground between the trucks where he'd stood, a white zip tie. Unused, clean, as if it had just been peeled out of the packaging. I've watched that clip too many times. More than I should have. And I keep asking myself, if Howard Keegan is dead, then who's still watching from the blind spots? Part of me thinks it's just a shadow in the mind, the kind of fear that clings to long-haul nights and empty roads. But another part of me, the part that survived icy highways, empty fuel stops, and the sound of wind hitting steel at 2 a.m., believes something else. The blind spot isn't just in the mirror. It's in your head, where the darkest things wait quietly for you to stop, alone. The memorial stone at Red Pine Station still stands. Etched on it is the line Owen's wife chose. The road is long, but they are not forgotten. And every year, on that same day, a convoy of trucks rolls past and blasts their horns 3 times. Slow, heavy, solemn. A quiet warning that echoes through the hills. Be careful of what you can't see, because sometimes it's staring right at you.